welcome to the first ever Advanced in Coding lesson. Today we're going to learn how to create a drag and drop feature from scratch with no extra libraries using only Nuxt3 and Vue3. We're not going to use any CSS libraries or JavaScript libraries other than Nuxt.js and VueJS. This is because using no libraries, you'll be free to choose whatever you want in the project you are to implement this feature, so you're not gonna have to implement exactly what I have done in this video. This will be a long video, so get your coffee ready and prepare to be seated for a while. Let's start! First of all, you need to go to nuxt.com, click Get Started, and then go through this installation guide. That is pretty simple, just need to scroll down, copy this command, then you open your VS Code or your terminal. I'm gonna open my Debian WSL here, so I have a special folder. Then I'm gonna paste it here. Okay, so in the project name, you're gonna erase it and call it the name you want. I'm gonna call it drag and drop with VueJS. Cool. Now I have to select, like it's asking me to select which package manager I wanna use, and I would like to use Yarn because for now I think it's the more feasible one. Okay, so everything is done. We now go to the folder we created, okay? And then we can just hit yarn dev. So what does it mean? The project is running. Let's check if it is really running. Okay, so this is the base project from Nuxt.js. From here, we're gonna start. Now, what I'm going to do is just close my client, okay, and then open my VS Code inside that folder. So here's the VS Code inside the folder. First modification I want to do here, it is just like a personal preference because I come from like Vue 2 since the beginning and I prefer to run in the port 8080, but it's just because I want to, you don't need to do it, okay? Everything is running well. Now we can start building our architecture, okay? First of all, we're gonna use some features that only exist on Nuxt.js, for example, the Composables and the auto imports. Composable is a Nuxt.js API. It's very useful. It's just like a Redux thing, you know, that you can like store states in a global, so you can access from every component. But it's much easier. I'm gonna show you how it works, and it's very, very simple. First thing you have to do is to create a folder here called Composables. Then you create a file with the name you want. I'm gonna call it drag and drop.ts because I'm using TypeScript, but you can also use JavaScript. Then what you have to do is just do an export, use drag and drop, for example. Copilot is helping me here. Then you're gonna use the use state, but do not confuse it with the React use state. This is completely different, okay? So use state, then you're gonna name the use state, drag and drop, then you're going to assign a function. In this function, you can return basically everything, but I'm gonna return an object here. We're gonna use this drag and drop because in the future, you're gonna see that we need to globally clone an object to drag it all over the screen without any glitches and without any CSS properties conflicting with what we are doing with the object we are like dragging around the screen, okay? So what we're gonna need here, basically 5 properties. You can name it the way you want. I'm gonna name it like the way I think it's more understandable for you that is watching me. First thing we're gonna have to store is the element we are dragging. And this is a HTML element, so it's gonna be a div or I don't know, everything that is an HTML element. So I'm gonna name it dragging element and it's gonna be null. Then I'm gonna set here if it is dragging. It is a state that it is true or false, just so the application can understand if something is being dragged. Then we need to store if we're dragging over something, because in this project we're gonna be like dragging items from a column to another. We need to know if we're dragging over a column or over another object. So we can drop it in that object, and that object captures the event and say, hey, there is a new element coming to my array, so I can display it in that column. So I'm gonna call it dragging over column. It's an HTML element, so I'm gonna set it null. We're gonna drag elements that contains data, and we need to know the data that is inside that element. So when I drop it in over another column, the column can render that element with the original data inside it. Okay, so I'm gonna call it dragged data and call it null, because basically it can be anything. I don't need to know. The component will know which kind of data we're dealing. Okay, so this is what we need for our state. We can hit save and go to the next step. The next step is to go to app VueJS. Okay, so we have this Nuxt welcome, that is the default component from Nuxt.js, but we don't want it, and we don't want to write anything actually inside this app.vue. So we're gonna create two folders here. One being components. I always recommend creating a file inside any folder you create that is the git keep. Okay, so the first folder is components and the next folder is page. Okay, now we can go to our first page. We're gonna create here inside the pages a file called index.vue. Okay, so this is the template we need. Template, script, and styles. Here in the template, we set the homepage. Let's see if this really works, but first we need to go here in the app.vue and make some changes. So first change is that we are gonna set here the Nuxt page. So Nuxt can render a page, okay? Let's check if it works. Okay, so it's working. We have our home page here. After creating the Nuxt page, we can go here to our home page and basically set any component that we want here. So we're gonna create a new component called the home.vue.js. Cool, so we have our template here. So from here, we have our home page, right? So we're gonna add here a drag and drop component. Okay, so let's call it the board, okay, because it's like a board. We don't have this component yet, so we're gonna create it. Okay, this is our board component for a while. So we go to index again, and then we have to use the home component so we can display the board component, right? Here, I'm gonna just add a wrapper so we can see everything work. So it should have the home and the board printed on our screen. Okay, and there we have it. Next step, you're gonna start creating the draggable components. So we're gonna go in the components folder and create another folder called Draggable. Inside Draggable folder, you can name the component the way you want, but as Nuxt.js has auto import, it gets the name of the folder and the name of the component to create the name of the element you're gonna put in your other components. So I'm gonna go and create another component here called item. This way, to import it, I'm gonna use, for example, draggable item, okay? And this component will hold all the logic of dragging things from a place to another. So let's create here a wrapper, and we're gonna use the slots because we're gonna put things inside the draggable item so we can drag everything, not just what is inside this component. Like, it's not fixed. I don't have to put here what I want to drag. I can drag everything. So let's use the slot. Cool. Now let's create here another folder that I'm gonna call shared. And this shared folder is where we're going to store everything that is shared among components, among like any other feature in your application. But in this case, we're gonna mock some data so we can drag it and like we have something to display. Of course, this is gonna come from a request or I don't know, a backend, everything you want, or user inputs in the screen. But for now, it's just mockup file. So let's go. We're gonna do a quick typing here because just to create a very simple element. Okay, so string, you should do it in a type file and then cast here, but I don't want to waste too much time on these things. Then you're gonna use loading flicker. Okay, so we're gonna use this service. This is pixel.photos that it generates random images. Okay, let's check if Copilot can generate. Okay, it can generate a lot of mockups. Okay, that's cool. And this is what we're going to be using to do the example we want. So the mockup file is ready to go. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is let's render this somewhere. Okay, I'm gonna use the bar to render it. I'm gonna create a wrapper here, and then I'm gonna to loop through those items. To do this, we're gonna need to import the file from the shared folder. So to do it next, you go to script and write just import as anything, as any other framework. Then we're going to attribute it to a variable. Okay, so here we find a little problem. That is, we don't know the type of this mockup, right? We have typed it here, but I don't know the type. So we should move it to a type file properly. Then we create in the shared folder, I'm gonna create a types file, and we import it inside the mockup file and cast it here. Okay, don't forget to add this type before the interface you want to import. And then, okay, we can have it here, and then we're gonna loop through all the mockup items we have. Just do v4. We should have, yeah, you have all the items here. So let's do something better and display this picture. Okay, we have a problem here that SAS is not installed, so we're gonna finish our server, then go yarn add -d SAS. Then we can run it again. Okay, there we have it. We're not showing anything because I don't like to use the image HTML for displaying this kind of image, so I like to use the background property of a div. And it's probably this way because we have to set a height and a width to a div. So let's do it. Yeah, okay, now we have our image here. This was misplaced, so it goes. Yeah, should have this kind of display here. Yeah, now that we have everything displayed, let's decrease the size of this image. Yeah, much better. Okay, now we have our draggable element. Now, how do we drag it? Because currently we can't do anything with it, right? Well, first thing we have to do is go to our item.VueJS, okay? So here we have put like everything inside the board. So in this item wrapper, instead of doing the item wrapper thing, we're gonna go and put this item wrapper inside the draggable item and the slot we have created. So let's do it. So okay, it is inside our draggable component, but it's displaying weird, right? So that's because we have placed the class of the item wrapper inside the draggable component, like inside the slot. So we should change it. Okay, now we have the correct behavior. Now let's go to the drag. We go to item. So to avoid glitches, it's recommended to don't let the user select. So we're gonna use that user select none. Then user can't select anything because when you select, some glitches happen. Right. Next thing, it's just create the drag and drop functionality. Okay. First thing, I'm gonna create the drag functionality. So let's go. We're gonna use a ref. A ref, it's just a way to the VueJS, like the machine, to know which element is this one. So it puts it in a variable so we can manipulate it. Okay, it's just like React, I think. Then we are going to add a class to this slot position 2 draggable item that we're gonna deal with in the styles. Now we go to the setup script and we're gonna add some variables here. First of all, we're gonna use the drag and drop composable. So how to use it? It's just create a variable and assign the use drag and drop. Now we're gonna just get the dragged item, and Copilot just helped us here. This is exactly what I need. Then what I'm gonna do is to set some object that I'm gonna really drag, because when you drag things, notice that this is inside an element, that is inside another element, that is inside another element, and etc. So when you try to drag it, it will probably glitch with the div it's inside, like the parent div. So what we do to manipulate it and make you think you're really dragging an element is to clone an element. So I'm gonna create another variable here that is it's gonna be called movable object. Then it is ref, also with an HTML element, just like dragged item. Yeah. Now we need to set up some variables here. The first one is the drag offset, that you will store the amount of pixels our object has been dragged by the mouse. Like, and we calculate where the object should be, so it's like going together with the mouse around the screen. So this variable will be called drag offset. Then we're gonna set another variable here that is actually not a variable, is a property of this item view. That is like the content it will receive. Because as we have seen here in the composable, it has like dragged data, you know, so I have to receive it somewhere. And then I'm gonna receive it in the item.view. Yeah, I know this is not the best approach, but like we don't know which kind of data we want to drag. If you want to type it as unknown and keep converting it, you can do whatever you want. Then we're going to define our events. Let's define this emit. We're gonna define an event that's called like drop, okay? Because when we drop something, we want the parent element to know it, so it knows what to do with the data that is inside this item. Okay, so last step of defining things of the element is a watch property. We're gonna watch the drag offset, so we can move the object when this offset is moving around the screen. What we're gonna do is check if movable object exists. So we're gonna do the statement inversion here. That is to check if it doesn't exist, then return, to avoid like nesting statements. Then we're gonna get the value and the drag offset and set it in the movable object, so we can set the new position of that object that is being moved around the screen. Okay, so this is what we need to do to move our object. Okay, this is the basics here, but we have not captured any kind of event yet, so the object will not move, right? There's an error here, let me check. Okay, so let's start. First thing, we're gonna clone the element. When we click in the element, we want to clone it. Okay, so first thing here, to clone an element, we're gonna define one. So we're gonna use a dragged item that is our reference here to an element, and clone the node as an HTML element. So just dragged item.value.clone node true. We set true because if you don't set it, it will not copy the inner element. So yeah, the first thing is that. Then we're gonna get the rectangle of the element, so we can get the real boundaries of that element. Because if you can use like client Y, client X and things like that, but it's gonna glitch because it will be calculated in relation with the element it's in and not the screen as a whole. So I want to get the real boundaries of that element, so I'm gonna use this rect get bounding client function from native JavaScript. Then we're gonna set some styles for that element. And first thing that is necessary, and it's the position. We should set the position to fixed because it's gonna be over the screen. It could be absolute too, but with absolute I have noticed some glitches that happen. So fixed, I think it worked better. So let's do it, and then we're gonna paste another properties here. Yeah, and then user select none, the same way we have here. Pointer events none left. We are gonna set the position the element is in, because if I click on this element, I have one position, like one X and one Y. And if I click on this element, it's another, this is another, this is another. And what we want is that when we click here and try to drag, the element appears in the same position it's in. Okay, and you will understand why after, because like if we click here and if this doesn't appear here, I will be able to drag it anyways, but the position of this element will be like here in the screen and not under the pointer. So I want to be sure that the element is appearing in the same place the original element is, and the width and height to match like the same with the height, and the z index to go like it needs to be over, you know, any other div, any other element in the screen. You can use like 99999, but okay, I don't need it now. Next thing is just to give that feel of dragging, we go the cursor, or change the cursor to grabbing. Then we set that movable object to the element we just created. Okay, then we are going to set the drag offset value with the current rect x and rect y. So we have the initial offset that the object is in. Then we're gonna work here with events, like a window event. So we're gonna add event listener to the window, and this is the mouse move, because when the mouse moves through around the window, we want to know the position of it. So we have to use this kind of events, and we're gonna set this function just after this one. Then we're gonna append this element to the body of the document, because I need it to be outside any other div, any other element. So it's in the root, basically in the body of the page. Okay, so this is our clone element function. Now let's set up our set drag offset, because we're gonna need it. It's undefined right now. So this function is really really basic. It's just like we'll get the mouse event, we'll check if the movable object is null, and if it's not, it's gonna set the new position of the drag offset, like x and y. Okay, so we have some calculation here. You're gonna you can check this later, like you can tweak the values to see why I choose these values, but basically that's because if you use client X, it may glitch a little and be a little offset from the mouse, and movable this client width, we can know the real height and width of the object we are dragging, and it's gonna position the pointer in the center of that object. So it's basically to give that feel that you are in the middle of the object always. Okay, so this is what we need for our movable object. Then right now we're gonna set the events. We're gonna need two events, that is like when the drag starts and when the drag ends. So, and the drag end, it's when I stop dragging and I drop, basically. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is set our composable, okay, our composable that has a property called isDragging. Okay, so I'm gonna set it as false because I stop it dragging, right? Then I'm gonna remove the events I have added to the window to avoid conflicts with other the newer events I'm gonna add in. So remove all the events, and then I will remove that element that we cloned from the screen, because otherwise every element we drag, we would be adding elements and more elements to the document body, and this doesn't make any sense, right? So we're gonna remove the child, reset the movable object, and set the body cursor to initial, and emit an event called drop that we're gonna see later. Okay, so on drag start, it's the same thing. We're going to do the inverse of the drag end. So we're gonna set the isDragging to true. Dragged data, we're gonna put the content data, okay? And we're gonna clone the element. And we're gonna add an event listener called mouseUp, okay? And because basically when you release your button from the mouse, this means that you have dropped the element, right? So when we add this event listener, when the user releases the button, it will call the onDragEnd event, right? That's why the position is inverted here. Okay, so now we're gonna need a new variable here, that is, we need to store the initial position of the pointer. Okay, so we're gonna add here just a ref, just like the other one. We have the drag offset, basically the same thing, but we're gonna store only once and set the original time when the pointer when I click on the item I want to drag. And we're going to do this because I don't want to click and instantly activate the drag option. I want to have a threshold when I can drag my mouse a little, and then if I pass a certain number of pixels, I start actually dragging, because otherwise every time I click, the element will pop up in my mouse, and I don't want it. It's a weird feel for this kind of feature. Yeah, so here we're gonna add this new function. This is watch drag, that is watching the drag. It's not a real watcher, it's just because it's watching, but it's not a VueJS watcher, is what I mean. And I'm gonna do inside the watch drag, it's when I'm watching the drag position. Okay, so then I'm gonna, inside this function, I want to watch the pointer, the real position of the pointer. So that's why this function is inside another. It could be outside the function, but as I want to be sure that the events here are unique, you know, I don't have a duplicate event, I prefer to use this way. It's like a self-sufficient object here. So we're going to store the original position as soon as I click on the div, and then I'm gonna start watching the pointer as soon as my mouse move. And this is what I meant 2 seconds ago. And when I drag, okay, from my original pointer position from X or Y here, I want to have a little threshold to drag. So I don't want to do this and start dragging, you know, I want to do this and start dragging. Then I set here like 10 pixels, for example. So after we move a little bit, then it will start dragging, actually dragging that item. Okay, so then this event here is just about this functionality, like to give the threshold. So we have this event. If you don't want it, just like don't use it. You can set to 0 here, or just like ignore this part. Okay, so right now we should have dragging functionality, right? Of course, no, because we're missing something. We have to set this event to happen sometime, right? So we're going to go into this draggable item div and add an event to it, and view to do the on event. So I'm gonna you use the @ symbol. So I'm gonna use on mouse down watch drag. Okay, so when my mouse is pressed, my button is pressed, it will call watch drag, right? That will start all the other events here. So we have it here. Okay, we can drag the mockup one. You notice that the image is not displaying, right? That is because we cloned the element. We can drag it and like drag around the screen, and notice that the element is still here. That is weird, right? Because it doesn't give that feel that we are dragging something. But don't worry, we're gonna change it soon. So to give that feel that the element is really dragging, I think the first thing we have to do here is fix the image. The image should appear here, so we have like the exact clone of the element, right? So let's do it. Okay, so now to fix this issue here, it's pretty simple. This happens because when you create styles on Vue.js, like with this tag here, scoped, this means that this style is gonna only apply to this component. So it's not gonna go outside the component. And when you clone a component here, you know, this component is not inside the board anymore. So we have to set it outside. And how do we do it? It's very simple. We're gonna get this item wrapper here. See that we have this item here, right? So this item wrapper is not gonna be dragged. It's not gonna be cloned to, and all the items is here because this have the flex positions and the positioning of the grid. So we need to apply some rules to the item too. And then how do we do it? It's just a matter of doing like this. Should not change anything, right? It's not changed. And then we need to get this and take it outside. And to take outside, we go to app.view, we create a tag here with SCSS, and then we paste here. It return to the original position, and right, our components are now being dragged with everything that they originally have. And we can drag anyone. This is glitching because like I have purposely set to not delete the clones because I want to see where they are and what's going on. Okay, so but basically our drag and drop feature is working here. We can drag in where we want outside the window and it comes back and it releases and where we need them to have. Let's just fix this first part here to like clean the screen, right? We just need to go here to that item and I need to just, if you didn't change anything, this shouldn't happen. So this should clean all the screen. You need to refresh because the elements are already there. And then here, when I just like drag something, it disappears when I release the button, right? So our drag and drop feature is basically ready. But to give that feel that we know which element we're dragging, we just need to do some styling here because right now I know because of the title, but if the title didn't exist, we would never know. So what I'm gonna do is to go to this onDragStart feature function, right? And add some styling here to the dragged item. So I'm gonna do opacity. You can do whatever you want, 0.5, and on drag, and I'm gonna do the we're gonna return to 1. So this way, when I drag something, the opacity goes down, and then I know that this is like being dragged. Okay, so this is the drag and drop effect. I'm splitting this video in 2 parts because I think it's long enough. In the next video, we're going to use this drag and drop to create a tier list. So keep following us to not miss it. Subscribe to the channel if you're not yet. Hit the bell to not miss the next part of this video. This is important. The repository is in the fixed comment if you want to check the code. And if you made this far, thank you very much for watching. Click like if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment if you want, and I'll catch you in the next one.